The Trump administration unveiled a slew of new trade deals in Asia this week. Chinese nationals continue to spy on the U.S. homeland, and Chinese hackers managed to breach a major U.S. nuclear security facility. Joining me with analysis of this and more, attorney, author, and foreign policy expert Gordon Chang. Gordon, thanks for being here. The U.S. reached a trade deal with the Philippines this week. You saw Ferdinand Marcos Jr. at the White House. The president also announced a major trade agreement with Japan. Gordon, what do these trade deals mean for the U.S. and the countries of Asia, particularly Japan, the Philippines, China, and Taiwan?
The most important thing is that for decades, we've had one-way trade with the world. We've had an open market, and other countries have closed theirs, not only with tariffs, but even more important, non-tariff barriers. And what is happening right now is President Trump has said, look, we're just not putting up with this anymore. And that is the context. But when we look at some of these deals, such as Japan and the Philippines, these are really important from a geopolitical point of view as well, because China, our enemy, is threatening Japan, they're threatening the Philippines, they're threatening Indonesia, all of these countries. And what we're doing is we are knotting together these countries with us into a global trade deal, in a sense, and that is excluding the Chinese.
U.S. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent said on Tuesday that he's going to meet with Chinese officials in Stockholm to discuss a deadline extension of negotiating a trade deal with China. Now, he says trade with China is in a good place, Gordon. He also said China's dependence on Iran and Russia for oil is a key issue in those upcoming trade talks. What can we expect from those talks with China? And is there a danger of decoupling trade from human rights and religious concerns there?
Yeah, I think that in Stockholm next week, the Chinese are going to stall. Remember, we had a May 12th agreement with them, which the Chinese, by the way, have already violated. But there was a 90-day pause, and that ends on the 12th of next month. The Chinese are going to ask for an additional time, and we shouldn't give it to them because they've been just dragging their feet. But the important thing is that by trading with a Chinese regime, we're strengthening it. That regime has declared us to be its enemy. That regime has killed Americans, not only with COVID, but with fentanyl as part of deliberate policies. So no, we shouldn't decouple trade from human rights and from our relations with China. It was absolutely the wrong thing for Clinton to do in the 1990s. It's absolutely the wrong thing to do at our decade as well.
Yeah. Gordon, you wrote in The Hill that the Trump administration will grant licenses to Nvidia Corp so that it can sell those H-20 chips to Chinese parties. But we know that in April, Trump officials had prohibited the sale of H-20s in that country. What happened here? Why this reversal?
I think the reversal is that after that May 12th trade agreement, China promised to lift the embargo of the export of rare earths to the United States, but it didn't do that. So to get China to honor its promises, we've given them additional concessions. And one of those additional concessions is to sell the H-20 plus also AMD's new chip as well. So really, this is an additional benefit for China. In other words, what we've given China is an incentive to violate the next trade deal with us. So this is not good policy from any number of different perspectives.
Yeah, and anytime you trade intellectual property with the Chinese, expect it to be extinct any minute because they're going to copy it and create their own version, as they've done in multiple industries that we've shared with them or been in partnership with China and American corporations. But 2 Chinese nationals were charged. And this is why the whole thing blows my mind. 2 Chinese nationals are charged with acting as foreign agents and spying on the U.S. Navy to gather intelligence and enlist other agents. Now, this is according to the Department of Justice. This is a press release. They appeared in federal court, these 2 Chinese nationals, on June 30th to face charges issued by the Northern District of California regarding illegal clandestine activities on behalf of China's primary intelligence agency. Here's the quote. These activities included facilitating a dead drop payment of cash for information relating to the national security of the United States previously provided to the MSS gathering intelligence about U.S. Navy service members and bases, and assisting with efforts to recruit other individuals from within the United States military as potential MSS assets. Gordon, what are these cases of Chinese nationals being caught spying in the U.S. tell us about China's strategy, and should we be trading with them at all, given this?
Yeah, China has the most comprehensive campaign to obtain information out of the US. And they do it legally, but in this case, it was also illegally. And we have seen China go after our secrets, including some of our most important ones, including the Department of Energy a couple days ago, our nuclear weapons agencies. So really what we have got is just a comprehensive assault on our secrets. And by the way, the story here is that we've allowed our networks to be compromised. So this is a story of American obliviousness and negligence, as well as China's maliciousness.
Gordon, tens of millions of Android and iPhone users are being warned. If they've installed free apps, they could be at serious risk. Now, those users could now be sending sensitive data to companies under the control of the Chinese government. We know that TikTok was a concern, but now it's other apps as well. How dangerous are these apps in the aggregate?
Well, in the aggregate, they are taking information from our young, for instance. And people will say, well, who cares about a 17-year-old? But look, every president of the United States, every Supreme Court justice, every senator, every representative, every governor was once a 17-year-old. And China is getting a lot of information that they can use to compromise our future leaders. So, you know, the Chinese don't allow our apps, so I don't see why we're allowing China's apps in our country. We should follow India's example and just ban TikTok and other Chinese apps.
Yeah, well, this again, when you have pressure from these corporations, the American policymakers start to buckle. And they say, well, look, there's money to be made and we're killing an industry. What about free speech? This isn't free speech. It's foreign surveillance. And I don't think we've quite gotten that in the heads. The populace doesn't understand it. Let's be honest, Gordon. And I think the policymakers in D.C., there's an incentive to ignore it or look over it. That's a bad, bad tell. If TikTok was sucking up our information 4 years ago, and that was the big fear, and we took government officials and agents off of those apps, why did it suddenly become okay this week? I don't understand any of this. But let's get to this. Last week, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un told Russia's top diplomat his country was ready to, quote, unconditionally support Moscow's every effort to resolve the conflict in Ukraine as the two countries held high-level strategic talks. The two countries' foreign ministers held their second strategic dialogue, pledging further cooperation under this partnership treaty that they signed last year. Gordon, relations between Russia and North Korea have really deepened during this war in Ukraine. North Korea's deployed more than 10,000 troops and arms to Russia to back Moscow's campaign. What are you hearing about this alliance, and will it continue to grow?
I think it'll continue to grow because the United States is not doing anything to make sure the North Koreans pay for this. You know, and it's not just that North Korea now provides about 40% or so of the Russian munitions used in the war. There are reports that North Korea is going to send another 30,000 troops to the front. When you're talking about a war of attrition where the Ukraine is being ground down slowly, this is really important. And by the way, they're not only North Korean troops they're Chinese troops as well. There's Chinese mercenaries, but there's also People's Liberation Army officers there, presumably as observers or advisors, but there's going to be more Chinese presence in the front in Ukraine.
There was an announcement today, Gordon, that when I saw it, I thought I should bring it to your attention. The United Kingdom is reintroducing extradition cooperation with Hong Kong, meaning they will send former Hong Kong residents now living in Britain back to China. Should the Chinese, or in this case Hong Kong, you know, standing in front of the Chinese regime, should they request these residents to be returned for extradition? Your thoughts on this?
Incomprehensible. You know, this is the Karl Starmer government is not only thinking of this, but it's also thinking of allowing China to have that mega embassy which is going to be a threat to security in not only Great Britain, but remember, Great Britain is a Five Eyes partner. Um, there are all sorts of things that are going on which are, just inconsistent with having a democracy. And so we've got to have some really tough conversations with London on this, because we should have no extradition relations with China, Hong Kong, or Macau.
Yeah, I mean, these are, and just so people understand, Hong Kong residents shared a dual citizenship with China, and they were British citizens, because at that time Britain or they were just British citizens. They weren't even Chinese citizens, were they, Gordon?
Well, they had something called British overseas nationality. And also, some people in Hong Kong actually had real British nationality. For instance, Jimmy Lai,
Right.
who is now rotting away in a Hong Kong jail.
Mm-hmm. So the idea here is the Chinese authorities can request British citizens, essentially, to be brought back to the Chinese mainland if they lived in Hong Kong. This is madness. This really is bizarre. When I saw that story, my eyes popped out of my head. But the world looks the other way, Gordon, and maybe they shouldn't. I'll give you the last
Yeah,
word.
this is really serious with what China's been able to do to get democracies to bend to as well. And it's not just Britain. It's Australia, where we had the Australian Prime Minister go to Beijing in his craven, just really awful display of appeasement. And then, we have in our country so many people who do the same thing. So this is serious. We have to have some honest conversations with the American people about who our friends are and who our enemy is.
Well, and to give you an idea of how deep the tentacles of the Chinese reach, I know a number of media personalities here in the United States who have been offered literally millions of dollars to publicly join TikTok, to wash it in the public domain so that it becomes okay for people to join because of the reticence after the fallout with Mike Pompeo and Trump in the first administration. It's an amazing, the power that China wields via funds and monetary inducements. They're flying these influencers into the Chinese mainland to make it look all sunny and like a fun destination. This is insidious because it's ignoring the human rights and the deep religious persecution that's going on in that country. Gordon, we will leave it there. We thank you for keeping us abreast of all of this. You're one of the few trusted sources analyzing and reporting on what's actually happening. We thank you for that. Gordon Chang. You can find Gordon on X at Gordon G. Chang. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.